Hey folks, this video is going to be a little bit different because I feel I owe the loyal, extremely loyal, in fact, few of you that regularly watch my videos and care what I have to say an apology. Lately, the content I've been putting online has been of a far more aggressive and combative nature, and that is because I've been focusing a lot on what's been going on in my country, South Africa. For me, this is a very difficult thing because I'm always in two minds about South Africa and the global culture war, speaking more generally. Part of me really doesn't want to talk about what happens in South Africa because I'm never really able to say anything positive about the general situation in this country. So there's a big part of me that would just rather say nothing at all. But then there's another aspect in my mind that forces me almost to feel compelled to talk about these things that I consider to be very important. And I'll tell you why that is. Because you might say, there are lots of people who talk about South Africa and what goes on. Why do you feel like you have to do it? And the reason for that is directly tied to my personal reality. If you've watched any of my content at all, you will know that I have a severe physical disability. I was born with a condition known as quadriplegic cerebral palsy, which resulted from an incident at my birth which damaged my brain, and I've had to use a wheelchair for my entire life and will until the day I die. What this meant in terms of my personal development is that for the vast majority of my life, I was basically left with nothing that I could do other than to develop the functionality of my mind. Because, particularly in South Africa, accessibility to public life is simply not a high priority. We have so many other, far more extreme and pressing social issues on our plate here that the rights and concerns of people with physical disabilities rank fairly lowly on that totem pole, as it were. So, because I have spent a life characterized by a lot of social isolation and lack of opportunities, all I really had was my mind. And I'm not boasting about how intelligent I am. This is not a case of me wanting to tell you how smart I am, how wise I am, none of that shit. The fact is, I cannot take any credit for my intelligence because largely it's something I was simply born with. And although I have taken steps to develop it further, I think that in terms of raw intelligence, I was just genetically lucky. So I don't take credit for that. But what it means is that my mind works fairly quickly and often more quickly than I want it to. So I have thoughts rolling around in my head all the time. And I can't simply ignore things when I notice that they are incorrect. This relates directly to the content I've been making lately because a couple of days ago, I released a response video to a prominent Black South African podcaster, influencer, and content creator who goes by the name Penuel the Black Pen. He released a video directly addressing white South Africans, in which he told us, in no uncertain terms, what he believes white South Africans owe the country, and specifically owe black South Africans, because of the lasting legacy of apartheid. I was very critical of him in that video because I strongly disagree with basically every policy for which he advocates. And unsurprisingly, this led to the vast majority of black people who saw my video either calling me racist, claiming that I only disagree with him because I want to protect white interests, or simply saying that I didn't listen, with the implication being that if I had really listened to him, then I would agree. Obviously, the worst of these comments that I received was a black person straight up calling me subhuman because of a growing belief advocated by rather prominent individuals that white South Africans are genetically inferior to blacks. Now, that kind of rhetoric is nothing new. Black separatists have been advancing the narrative that white people are Neanderthals for decades. So it's not new. But what I realized in making that video and in confronting all the people who left negative comments was that I was not nearly as kind to them as I could have been. Now, you might say it's natural for me to want to be aggressive when people approach me with aggression. But as natural as that might be, it only furthers the cycle of hatred and distrust that already exists in South Africa and in the world more broadly. So for that, I would like to apologize. But I do want to make it clear that I am not backing down 1 inch on anything I said with regard to Penuel's policies for the future of South Africa. I carry no white guilt for the legacy of apartheid. I don't care if you say that I benefit from white privilege. I grew up middle class. Yes. I grew up with 2 parents, a mother and a father. Yes. I went to college. Yes. But I've not had a conventional form of employment for nearly a decade now. And my disability renders my life such that I very seldom ever get to leave my house. Going back to my physical development, as I said, for most of my life, I didn't have any physical activity as such. And although there was a time several years ago where, thanks to a very generous and committed Taekwondo instructor who literally changed my life, I have physically improved, and I'm far stronger and physically capable than I used to be. I am still drastically limited in terms of my opportunities for social engagement by my disability. That being said, I'm going to try not to engage in culture war content anymore. I'm going to try not to be needlessly aggressive or hostile, and I'm going to try to go back to doing what I have always wanted to do, and that is to be a positive influence and to try to put out uplifting content that brightens the days of the people who see it. That said, I'm not going to devolve into a spineless coward who refuses to call out bullshit when I see it. I simply won't actively go looking for it, and I'm not intending to make another kind of response video similar to the one I made toward Penuel. I'll tell you why I singled out Penuel's address to white people to respond to. The reason I'm aware of Penuel at all is that I came upon his content probably last year, or it could even have been the year before that. I'm not sure on the timeline, but when I first came upon Penuel's content, I genuinely believed that he would be a force for unity in South Africa. I believe that he was of a similar mindset to me, trying to establish a kind of balanced and reasonable post-apartheid South Africa in which our racial differences weren't the first thing that we looked at in our interactions with one another. The reason I responded to his address to white South Africans is that I realized that although he is a competent public speaker, meaning that he can address an audience at length without stopping, I don't believe there to be much value or substance in the things he says. And I believe that much of what he says is self-contradictory and self-defeating. Because in one sentence, he will say that black South Africans have a duty to develop a culture of self-reliance and independence. And in the next sentence, he will directly contradict that by saying that the ultimate responsibility for fixing South Africa rests with white South Africans because, in his mind, we still control the vast majority of the wealth in South Africa. So, the reason I responded to him was from a place of emotion. I was angry because he repeated the same shit that the politicians he claims to hate, or not to trust at the very least. He said the same shit that they say. He just said it in a more subtle and less aggressive way. So I responded out of disappointment and anger because I thought that he was someone that represented a positive change in this country, someone who represented the chance for a brighter future where we aren't all just fighting with each other over racial grievances from decades ago. But I no longer believe that. Going forward, I intend to make much less content about South Africa because, frankly, it's just not good for my mental health. And I notice that whenever I start to focus my mind on the daily events in this country, I descend into an attitude of anger, hostility, and bitterness. And that's not good for me, and it's not of any use to anyone who sees my content. So once again, I apologize for not being as in control of myself as I perhaps should have been. I hope to continue to provide content to you that is of some value, and that you will forgive me for this lapse that I have undergone. That's all I've got to say. Look after yourselves, take care of each other, and for now, farewell.